Hello, I'm Bomgeun Lim from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. I was doing so badly at school that I couldn't see a future in Korea, so I chose to study abroad, dreaming of a life-changing success. However, even in a different country, I was still the same. This led to frustration and despair, but after meeting the risen Jesus, I now know my real identity and am living the life of a royal priest. I did very poorly in school. I wasn't last in class, but second or third to last. One time, during a math exam, I could understand the questions surprisingly well. I thought, my expensive tutoring sessions are paying off. When I was checking the answers after the exam, I realized that I had solved the first problem correctly. I was filled with self-confidence. I thought, wow, I never thought this day would come. But when I moved on to the next question, I saw that I had gotten it wrong. I told myself, oh, that's okay, and I kept going. But I got the next question wrong too. From this point on, I knew something was wrong. I ended up getting 29 out of 30 questions wrong, and I got a score of 4% on the exam. I was traumatized. It wasn't that I didn't study. I even had a private tutor and studied hard. But a 4%? I couldn't believe it. That was when I gave up on studying. My parents realized this too and sent me to Malaysia when I was 16 years old. At first, I was afraid, but the new environment, new challenge, and new beginnings filled me up with hope and expectations. My brother and I stayed at a missionary's house according to my mom's wishes. Usually, international students take English courses for 6 months before starting school. But we started school 3 days after we arrived in Malaysia. It was a terrible experience. The teacher spoke English for 8 hours, and I did not understand a word she said. It was horrible. During one midterm, my stomach started to hurt. This happened to me from time to time because I had weak intestines. I really needed to go to the toilet. However, it was a very important exam, so I did my best to hold it in. I took the exam holding my stomach with one hand and my pen with the other. The hour was a horrific battle. My legs were trembling, I couldn't think straight, and my face was dripping with sweat. 30 minutes left till the end of the exam. I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my hand. After trying to figure out how to explain the situation, I decided to explain diarrhea. I did my best to explain it to the teacher, using all the words I knew. I said, "Teacher, help me. My poo is... water! Water poo!" However, the teacher said, "What? What?" and did not understand. She told me just to wait. Then I couldn't help it anymore. I had an accident in my pants. I had problems with basic communication, so I could not follow class lessons. I had come to Malaysia dreaming of success, but this dream evaporated. I couldn't even adjust to school life. Also, all the exams had short answer questions and not multiple choice, so I couldn't even guess the answers. I couldn't even have done well in Korean, so in English it was impossible for me. I failed every exam, and every time I wallowed in despair. But what I'm really thankful for was the missionary I was living with. He always told me, God will always be with you and help you. And he helped me fix my eyes on God. I opened up my heart to the missionaries who encouraged and comforted me as if they were my own parents. And because of them, I started to attend Sunday services. Services, worship, and prayer gave me strength and courage after all the failures I had. During those hours, I was so happy to be able to let go of all my burdens and meet God. This gave me the strength and peace to face the next day. But when I opened my eyes the next morning, all of the joy was gone before the reality I faced. University brought a whole new level of agony. The degree of difficulty was totally different from that of high school. They had to read scores of thick, specialized books written in English, and there were countless presentations and exams. During sophomore year, I had to apply for internships. Everybody wanted to do theirs in famous companies for better experiences and better resumes so that they could get a good job later. I applied to a famous company. I was not a good speaker, so I wrote down answers for possible interview questions and memorized them all ahead of time. I memorized them until I could say them automatically. What I didn't know at the time was that this scheme would completely backfire on me. The day of the interview was finally here. The first two questions were familiar to me, so I said my perfectly memorized answers in the exact same tempo and tone I had practiced. But I got so nervous when answering the last question. I started to say the same answer as the first question in the perfectly same tempo and tone as before. In my head, I told myself, Bomgeun, no, no. But my mouth continued to recite the all too well practiced answers to the first question. I could not stop it. That's how I spoke all that English to my heart's content and didn't get the internship at the company I had wanted. But that was not all. Another 2 interviews after this one ended up in the same way. My school couldn't sit by and watch me do this anymore. They got me hired at a school-affiliated company without an interview. My dad got angry and yelled at me for wasting my years at school and ending up in a company no one had ever heard about. I spent that night in tears. One evening, I was sitting in a dark room doing piles and piles of assignments. Many thoughts crossed my mind. What am I doing here? Do I really have to live like this? I felt so frustrated and lonely. I wanted to give up, but I couldn't. I barely graduated and went straight to the army to serve my term in the military. When I came back from the army, I looked for a job, but I couldn't find one. I planned and tried many things, but they all ended in failure. I don't know if it was because the 2 years spent out of society while I was in the army, but every effort to find a job abroad turned out to be a failure. So I turned back to the Korean job market, but it was even harder to find a job here. I experienced failure countless times. I had studied abroad to fulfill my dreams, but all I had left from it was defeat and a sense of inferiority. Many people tried to encourage and help me, but the fear of failure seized me and I didn't want to do anything. I blamed myself and my parents, and I got more and more pessimistic every day. My life was meaningless. I came to hate myself. Then I started to blame God, who I had so longed for and leaned on. I didn't know where he was. I came to doubt his very existence. The God who seemed to have protected me all this time wasn't anywhere. I couldn't find him. I had to solve all of my own problems, and I had to carry all of my burdens. There was no God who can take away my burden. There was no God whom I once trusted. While I was going through this difficult time, my mother suggested that I go to Hanmaum church with her. Because I was so exhausted, I decided to follow her. In the sermon and during fellowship with other people, I noticed everyone repeatedly mentioning the resurrection of Jesus. Then there were tons of questions. How do you know that Jesus is God? They said, the resurrection is the proof of that. But I couldn't understand what that meant. I knew that these were simple and basic questions, but I had never heard nor thought about them, so I could not answer any of them. But I knew that they had the peace and joy I did not have, so I became open-minded and sought God earnestly in order to have their joy in me as well. And finally, God came to me also. During the sermon, The pastor talked about the sign of Jonah in Matthew chapter 12. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees asked for a sign because they were doubting Jesus. But Jesus knew their hearts and called them wicked and adulterous. Then he said that he would give them a sign they could believe in by rising from the dead. And here, I realized that I was no different from these Pharisees and scribes. I always sought God in difficult times. I would pray, I will believe in you if you solve these problems before me. Give me a sign that I could see and feel at this moment. This was how I tested and doubted God as I prayed. Then when no answer came, I would say, you know I live for you. Why aren't you helping me? I live only for you. So why do you make things so hard for me? And I blamed him so much for my unchanging circumstances. But Jesus rose again 2,000 years ago, as written in the Bible, as prophesied. God had paid with his life to give us the exact sign, proving his existence and the fact that he was living. He had already given us the unshakable proof, showing us that he is alive and that he is the Almighty God, the Creator. When I was standing in front of the risen Lord, the reality of my faith and everything in my heart was revealed. Until then, I had confessed that Jesus was my Lord and my God. However, I had not once, not even once, actually treated Jesus as my Lord. I was the enemy of God, the child of wrath. I was the devil. But still, Jesus had died to save me. Then he had risen again to show me his existence and all of his love. But I still had not recognized my Father and still doubted like the Pharisees. I had even disowned him and crucified him. I had to repent before God the sin of not believing in Jesus. Then I gladly received Jesus as the Lord of my life. Amen. When Jesus became my Lord, I felt like I was flying. I was filled with the peace and joy that the world could never give me. And I finally realized why I had always lived as a failure. Everything was a result of having been my own master. Because my life had been mine, I had gotten devastated every time I failed. Anytime something happened, I had tried to solve it myself. That is why I had been so exhausted. I had always carried with me the pain of failure. I had been living a life of a failure, but Jesus showed me what my true identity was. It was during a summer retreat. The pastor prayed like this: the world is dark. Young people are leaving the church, and everyone in the world is dying. But you who have the gospel of the resurrection are the ones who will save the world. Everyone in the church body received this as God's vision. And I did too, as I was praying there with them. God had a great vision for me, a vision so great that I could never have dreamt of it. My perspective had been totally different from God's. I had always been swayed by my problems and circumstances, so I had struggled to figure out what to do. I didn't have anything. I always failed. I thought I was just a loser. But when God looked at me, he didn't see a loser, but a royal priest, the one who can save the world. And he had been waiting for me to see this as well. Amen. The Bible verse, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God," became real to me. Now I felt like I was living again. I could breathe again. I had found the purpose and reason for my life. My heart was on fire, and I was filled with confidence. And every part of my life became naturally focused on completing the task of testifying the gospel. I had a friend who was similar to me in that he saw himself as a loser and could not adjust to society, was preparing to commit suicide. I met him for the first time in 10 years, and God allowed me to share the gospel with him. He asked me, "Does fear really go away when I believe in Jesus? Can I live in peace when I believe in Jesus?" At that moment, the love of Jesus was poured into my heart, and I shared the gospel in tears. With the grace of God, that friend received Jesus as his Lord. He held on to his true identity and went out to the world he used to fear.
Amen.
I also came to teach at a university in English. Before, I would have never done things like this. How could I think that I could teach anyone? But when I focused on the mission of sharing the gospel, God gave me wisdom and knowledge. Above all, He gave me the opportunity to preach the gospel to the students. If Jesus hadn't risen from the dead, I would still be living in dejection and despair as a maladjusted person. But Jesus came to this earth, died and rose again to be my Lord, and allowed me the life of a royal priest. He is my Lord, and He is my God. To Him I give all the glory. Thank you.